Hello, I'm Professor Seth Frey. Now, we've learned a little bit about how to read some code, how to write some code. Now we're going to learn how to not read code, how to skim code, when that's useful, why it's good, why it's bad, why you should definitely know how to do it. So first I'll defend why would you skim. Then we'll compare what I mean by skimming relative to reading code, and I'll give you some tips for just how to get the gist of code. So skimming. Should you skim? Should you skim a book? Can you prepare for a book report? Can you knowledgeably write about a book having not read it, having just skimmed it? Some people get away with that. But I'm not saying do that. But I am saying, separate from your book report, maybe it took you 50 books to figure out which book you should actually read. So being able to, just run through a bunch and get the gist of them is a valuable skill for books. It's a valuable skill for code. So the pros of running code you don't understand, of skimming or running through visually code you don't understand, are that you're able to build off the shoulders of giants. You don't expect to have to know how your car runs to drive a car. Similarly, you should be able to glance at code, be like, oh, I think this is going to do this, and run it and expect it to do that. Now, and being able to do that means being able to benefit off the brilliance of people all over the internet who wrote something that did something useful for them, figured it might be useful for others, and just put it out there for the world, for anyone to copy. Now, that said, there are cons to running code you don't understand, to skimming code, and sort of thinking it does this, and then running it and finding out it does something else. One, there's also bad people on the internet, go figure, and they can put malicious code that hurts you, that benefits them, that shuts down an entire city due to ransomware. There's bad things. So as you're doing this, as you're exposing yourself to the internet, to the good and bad of it, you do become savvy and you do become careful about what code you're running. You do want to pay attention to that. You get a better sense of when you're exposing yourself and when you're not. No matter what this code really does, it's probably benign. But in this course, code I give you, you can feel comfortable skimming it, getting the gist of it. I'm not going to do anything awful to you. So this is consider this class a nice sort of playground for getting practice at skimming. Now, what do I mean by skimming? Reading is sort of line by line, simulating the code in your head, going step by step. This is going to do this is going to get smaller into this, it'll get replaced by this, and really like being a computer, practicing being a computer in your head in advance of seeing what the computer actually does, which reading code is a great practice. As you're going through every single one of your lessons, before you run code, having a guess of what it's going to do first, what the answer is going to be, is the best practice you can get from this course. Contrast that with just getting the gist of the code, sort of running through it, taking a glance at it, and just sort of guessing, oh, it probably does something like this. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's say at the top of my code, there's mention of eggs and cups and flour and sugar. And at the end of the code, there's a variable called cake. I can guess that the gist I'm getting from the code, having not looked at any of the logic, is that this is a recipe for making cake. If I have variable names about turning left or right, at the beginning of my code, these are, my low-level concepts, and at the end, I have a variable about getting to the store or getting a speeding ticket. I can guess that my code's about driving. This is what I mean, this super high-level sense of what code means. This is a valuable exercise. It saves you a lot of time. It improves your confidence a lot. And again, it gives you access to the brilliant things people are doing online. So I've already alluded to one strategy for skimming, which is hang on to meaningful variable names, what they mean, and meaningful function names. And the more you appreciate the incisiveness or cleverness or astuteness of other people's variable names and function names, the better you get at writing your own good variable names and making meaningful code that doesn't just do something, but builds meaning towards doing something valuable in the world. So that's already valuable. I'd say skip the boilerplate. What I mean is all languages, and Python's no exception, kind of have a bunch of sort of meaningless setup code in the first lines. And as you get better at skimming code, you just sort of learn to skip a lot of the beginning lines to get into the good stuff. And you start to learn to identify what the good stuff is. A lot of the good stuff is going to be not too indented. So Python's based on indenting. If you have some code that's 0 levels of indenting in, those are the highest level concepts in the code. And sort of the ones that are most likely to have big, general, meaningful meaning. Whereas you go more and more levels of indent in, you're kind of more getting into the specifics of implementation. You're getting inside the black box in a way that you want to do if you're reading the code and understanding the code deeply. You want to avoid if you're trying to just skim the code and get its gist. So stick with like the less indented code. Pay a lot of attention to variable names. And especially the good ones, the ones that seem to mean something, and skip the boilerplate. That'll set you up for skimming, which is a good practice. It helps you leverage other people's code, it gives you confidence, and it helps you get through stuff quicker. Is it always the right thing to do? No. You should get good at reading code. There's a time and place for that. But the more angles I give you on code, the more tools I give you for approaching it, the better you are, the more prepared you are to benefit from everything this course and your future in code has to offer.